We are live now.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of the meeting via the Council's website. Members, you are by now very aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphone muted except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or make a comment. There is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask that your patience is there if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. My fingers are crossed we don't have any issues today. Can I remind members and officers and public speakers that all virtual meetings will be recorded and that these recordings will be published onto the Council's website. Thank you. Members, I will begin by calling the names of all members of the committee to establish your presence. Can you please unmute and confirm that you are here? Thank you. So, Councillor Ian Bates.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Bowden.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor John Gowing.
Present.
Councillor David Jenkins.
Present.
Councillor Linda Jones.
Present.
Councillor Peter MacDonald.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present, Chair.
And substituting today, Councillor Mandy Smith.
Present, Chairman.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Mark Goldsack. Dawn, would you please report any apologies for absence?
We have apologies from Councillor Wotherspoon, Chairman. We have Councillor Smith substituting.
Thank you very much. Does any member wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? Taking the stunned silence as a no. Thank you. So we'll move on to page 3. Okay, we are being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 18th of December as a correct record. Can I ask any member who does not agree with this proposal to click the raised hand function on the right of your screen now? Okay, I see no objections to the proposal to approve the minutes as a correct record, so we'll take that as carried. Item 3, officers, do you have anything to add to the action log? I didn't hear anything there, so I assume that's a no.
Nothing for me.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 4, petitions and questions. We have received no petitions or public questions. So we move on to item 5, refurbishment of March Community Centre. I will, at the end of the report, ask for the reading of public comments by Dawn, a Democratic Services representative, but until then, can I please invite Tony Cooper and Tanya Meadows to introduce the report?
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just briefly introduce the paper and then ask Tanya to explain more detail about the project. This paper is brought effectively retrospectively to this committee to ensure that it's fully compliant in terms of the Council's governance requirements. As you'll see in the paper, it's the various strands of the project have been through their appropriate governance routes, but because the aggregate spend on this particular property asset is in excess of £500,000, it does require to come to this committee for approval. Apologies that it is coming whilst the work is on site and in a retrospective manner. Going forward, we will look to ensure that any projects of this nature come to this committee in advance and is in part a result of separate service strands operating sort of separately, but it is fully approved, but apologies for it being retrospective. But it is an excellent project, and if I can ask Tanya to detail it, and then I will cover the property elements at the end.
Yes, thank you, Tony, for that introduction. Morning, Chair, morning, members. I'm Tanya Meadows. I'm the Head of Service for Cambridgeshire Skills, and Cambridgeshire Skills is the Council's adult and community learning service. And the service has used March Community Centre for some years now. So we exist to support social and economic outcomes, and we use March Community Centre as one of our main hubs that services Fenland and Huntingdonshire as well. We are a grant-funded service at no cost to the council, And we have a similar governing board structure to a school, but essentially that governing board structure then reports into the C&P committee for further governance. So a tiny bit of potted history about the bid and the grant that's been awarded. There was a growth fund capital round from the Combined Authority at the back end of 2019. And we took the opportunity to apply for some refurbishment funds in order to expand the facilities that we have at March Community Centre. And was delighted in February last year to receive notification that we had been successful and been awarded a £400,000 grant to refurbish the centre, and in addition to that, to add more capacity to the centre. The centre did need a bit of loving care, so it was absolutely great news. Great news for the education service for adults, and also great for the community because pre-COVID, our footfall at this centre was staggering actually. We was attracting about 5,000 people per month into the centre. So you can see that the centre is the lifeblood really for March and the surrounding areas. So the proposal to the grant fund gives us greater capacity for the adult learning that takes place in that centre, but also in the community capacity as well, because there's a bit of a shared function at the centre. So we use it for our adult community learning service, but then we also rent out the space, or in actual fact with some groups, they can use the space pro bono for their particular community activities. So the £400,000 will allow us to create a lovely open plan reception, because the current reception is a little bit uninviting at the moment, and it's not terribly obvious where it is. So for those of you that know the centre, as you walk into the main building, the new facility is going to be on the left-hand side, a lovely open plan space. It's going to give us 9 classrooms. There's 6 at the moment, and it's going to give us some workshop space as well, which hasn't been used for many years. It's going to give us 2 new offices. We're going to have a community cafe at the centre that's been there for about 18 months now. And that's really important because we use volunteers in that community cafe that have learning difficulties and disabilities, and they're using that cafe for work and life skills, which is brilliant. The 400,000 is going to also allow us to adapt the toilets that we have there and give us a much needed changing space. And in addition to that, been able to find some funding from my own budget to upgrade the security. And we've very recently had 100 meg broadband put into the centre, which is for public access as well. So it's a really fantastic community asset. It will allow my service to offer a greater range of professional qualifications and also expand that community learning aspect. And the work should have started in pre-COVID terms last summer, and we should have had this facility for last September, but we all know what happened last year, continuing to happen this year. So an organisation called CJ Murfitts was a successful tenderer for the project, and they came in at a really good budget. And the work starts on site on the 8th of March and is going to take approximately 10 to 12 weeks. And we did receive an extension from the funders that the work must be completed by the end of June. So it will be completed by that time. And as Tony has mentioned, we've been through several sort of governance channels. The project was agreed by the SPAB board last March, and it's also been through GPC as well. So at this point, I'll hand back over to Tony to talk you through the rest of the proposition.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, so just to confirm, in relation to the core property elements, there is a £400,000 grant-funded internal refurbishment, as Tanya's discussed. At the same time, we are spending approximately £150,000 on essential maintenance to the fabric of the building. That covers a number of areas, but primarily replacement of the roof, which has reached the end of its life. And there will be a further £185,000 investment in replacing the heating plant and machinery, which again is approaching the end of its life cycle, which gives a total spend on the asset of £735,000. As Tanya says, the main project work is due to start on site on the 8th of March, but the property team have already been using its contractors to carry out extensive preparatory works, including removal of asbestos and other safety related works on site already, and that is one of the reasons for the delay in the programme, which was actually updated and altered last week, because we found more extensive asbestos and other materials when we initiated those works. So the project has been delayed, not only due to COVID, but due to site conditions. But as Tanya says, the funding envelope for it has been extended to the end of June, and work is due to complete at the end of May. It's also, I think, just excuse me, reinforced Tanya's point that as well as being a training facility, it is also an essential community facility for Marsh and the surrounding area. So it is a multi-function site and will retain that community centre function. So on that basis, I'm happy, Chair, to ask if members have any questions regarding the project.
Okay, just before we go on to the questions, I would just like to support the what the officers have said here. I'd like to remind committee members that you will have received comments from Councillor Count, one of the local members who's supporting the proposal. They will be attached, appended to the minutes, but could I just ask Dawn, could you possibly read those comments out, please, in support of this?
No problem. The paper you are receiving today is for endorsing and noting the successful award of previous funding, so it may not be the subject of extensive debate. However, in case you are interested in the view of a local member, in this case a privilege I share with Councillor French, I wanted you to know how much we endorse and support this project. The community centre is located in the very heart of March, with only the best interests of residents and those of the wider area in mind. To be able to offer teaching, training and qualifications in an area of multiple deprivation when a pandemic has stripped many of the normal opportunities in life could quite literally be a lifesaver. Not only will training be directly delivered here, but this location is envisaged to provide a vibrant administrative base from which the service will be able to reach out to communities across the local towns and villages to provide them with place-based learning. Any support you can give to this project will be appreciated.
Thanks for that, Dawn. Right, we'll go to questions now. We've got Councillor Chris Bowden first, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman. First of all, I must say that I'm a very strong supporter of what this project is going to achieve. It is very much needed and it will be massively useful. So I massively support the project. From the point of view of the C&I committee, however, I feel that we're almost going through the motions here, especially given that this is retrospective. We're almost going through the motions of looking at this. If C&I committee is to have some useful function, is to add some value to the whole process, then we really need to have more information concerning how the money is being spent. We've got about 5 paragraphs in this report, I think, which really deal with C&I matters, and they certainly don't go into the level of detail which allow us to be able to give the added value that this committee should give. Now, £735,000 in the circumstances that were given doesn't seem like a bad deal at all, but that's hardly a professional way of evaluating from a C&I perspective how well this particular building is being allocated. That's £735,000. So very much in favour of this. Happy that it's as little as £735,000. I know the building, and I think that getting away with a figure as low as that is quite good given the size of it. But I would like to suggest that in future, when we do get reports which basically have come from another committee, that we do have a greater emphasis on what we as C&I can manage to put into the process, rather than necessarily looking so much at the outputs from the other committee's side. As I said, in this case, the outputs I very much support, very much appreciate, and I look forward to supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Right. comments. Thanks, Chris. Councillor John Gowan.
Thank you, Chairman. I live in March. It's not in my division, but I firmly support this. And I think Tanya said most of what I was going to say. But in the past, the local Amdram group has put on several really good performances. And I've given several pints of blood there as well.
Not at the same time, I hope, John.
No, different times. No, I fully support it.
Okay. Well, I'm not seeing any further.
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. My hands don't seem to be working on my computer. Ian
Right.
Bates.
No problem then. Then at the right time, Ian, Councillor Bates, you step up, which you will be now.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for the presentation, Tanya and Tony. Very informative. Thank you. Some minor questions. I have to say, fully support the recommendations. It's at 2.4 of the report. I'm assuming that Cambridgeshire County Council owns the land. So I'll make that assumption. I think Tanya did answer half the question that I've got, where it talks about Fenland and East Cambs, and you mentioned Huntingdon area. So will students that maybe would like to come to March to do some study and upgrade their skills be able to attend from other districts? And the final question is, you mentioned about other people using the building. How much income are you likely to receive going forward once the repairs, the upgrade has been undertaken? So what income is likely to come back to this committee? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy to respond to both of those points. I'll take the income question first. Pre-COVID, we used to rent much of the facility, which brought in about £120,000 per year. Now, many of those groups were for the sort of older population, and even with hopefully the opening being in the summertime, we don't anticipate those groups rushing back to the centre because of the pandemic, even though there's the vaccination programme that's going on. So we're anticipating an income of the next fiscal year of about 70k, then with about £150,000 moving forward from that. The actual education service brings approximately £2.3 million grant into the service, about half of which is used from the centre and from the surrounding areas. Once we've got the facility up and running, with the additional learners that we anticipate that we're going to recruit, that is going to bring in an additional £400,000 worth of grant funding from the education side. So that's the money question. In terms of the geographical split and spread, we do have March Community Centre is sort of the head office for the organisation. Then we have a smaller hub, so we operate a hub and spoke model. We have smaller hubs in Ely, which is based in Ely Library, and also in Cambridge Central, which is Cambridge Central Library as well. And then pre-COVID, we operated out of 65 other venues, some of which were CCC buildings, others were schools, community centres, those types of things. So if it's more appropriate for somebody in East Cambs, for example, to travel to Ely, because that's going to be less of a distance for them, then we do operate a similar provision up at Ely Library. But if they wish to travel to March Community Centre for something that's offered there and not in Ely, then there is no sort of problems with crossing over that geography. And of course, we're in the online world at the moment, where there are no geographical boundaries. So we're getting recruits from here, there, and everywhere.
Okay, happy with that, Ian, I assume. I don't see any more questions. I will ask the question, but I don't see that we've got any really objections to these recommendations. I would just like to add one point, and that is that something that's Chris has raised. I have a desire to sharpen things up a little bit when they're coming to CNI. I think on too many occasions we're no more than a rubber stamp for what's gone through in other committees. We have a role to play, and I think Chris was right. Councillor Bowden was right to highlight what he did. And I'll try and work with the officers before the reports are coming in to make that better, because I do think sometimes we're no more than just cementing other people's ideas. So I think there's more that we can add to that. If I see no objections, if anybody's got an objection to the recommendations, if you could just raise a hand now, please. Okay, so I see no objections, so we'll take the recommendations as carried. Thank you very much. Can I just also say, particularly Tanya and Tony as well, but Tanya, it's always lovely to see an officer both present a report and display the passion for the subject as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Okay, we will move on to item 6, which is the first stage report on Care Suites East Cambridgeshire and the property implications. Gurdev, I think I've seen you. There you are, Gurdev. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Item 6 is an information report for noting, and I would very much welcome feedback. I'd like to draw committee's attention to probably 4 points. One is that this is about delivering a new accommodation-based capacity for older people. Secondly, it's to try and take advantage of exploring the opportunity in the Ely area adjacent to the hospital development, where we are looking to acquire land and build services if it's appropriate. And thirdly, officers have made some preparation work already to develop that opportunity. And fourthly and finally, that we would very much like the opportunity to return back to this committee for key decisions later in the year as the programme evolves.
Okay. Is that all you want to say on the report at the moment, Gurdev?
It is, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, let's move to that. It is a report for noting only. Anybody got any questions at this stage? Councillor Bowden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. My comments on this report are almost the exact opposite of my comments on the previous report. I think I'm extremely grateful that this has been brought to us at the stage that it has, and I note that the final decisions to be made about proceeding with this particular project are not yet made and will be subject to further evaluation. And we will play a part in that, in looking at the financial side of the project. The project as a whole, of course, I do very much support. I can see the logic behind it, and I very much hope that this will be able to go ahead. But the really important thing is that we mustn't, both we in C&I and officers in general, mustn't allow this project just to go ahead at all costs. It does need to be evaluated at various key points before the key decisions are made. I do hope that it's going to be successful. I see no reason why it shouldn't be successful, but we do have a role to play here in evaluating the financial element of this. And if those numbers significantly change, or if the risks significantly change, then we mustn't be afraid to highlight that and to challenge. But as I say, I hope it goes well, and I'm very pleased that we're given this interim report, this early report, in order to note and to see what's going on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Jones, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to flag that I'm on the Care Suites members group on behalf of C&I, and absolutely endorse what Councillor Bowden is saying about the cost issue. I mean, there's another issue, I think, alongside this, which is that the idea of this is this might be a first Care Suites initiative, and there might be others. And so I think it's really important that this comes back to the committee, not least because the model and the financial model for this could be a financial model for other sites in the future. So I think the committee needs to be aware that this is part of a more ambitious and wholly commendable project, but more ambitious project by the County Council. I think it will need considerable attention going forward.
Thank you, Linda. Councillor Jenkins, David, please.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I think Gurdev's done a super job in presenting this, and he's handled questions at the spokes meeting very well indeed. But every time you look at these papers where they're relatively complex, you come up with more comments. First suggestion, if I may, on page 28, there is a timetable. I think it would be useful to put into that timetable the decision points and when exactly we'd expect this committee to make an input to this project. Because as we've noted, this is for noting, and it does say in the report that it'll come back to the committee for decision later. So let's have that identified in the timetable, then we can prepare for it. I'd like to endorse an awful lot of what Chris Bowden has said in general. I think he said it anyway. And I've said it before, it is not our job to second guess other committees, but we do need to have their unqualified support that they are behind the projects that come to us. And then we put it through the financial ringer appropriately. To some extent, that principle applies more broadly because there are other governance issues here which we need to be comfortable have been properly addressed. Because I understand this development is linked to housing developments in East Cambs, which involve a land swap, which would liberate land for this development. And there are some local concerns about low affordable housing percentages and loss of green space. It is not our job to second guess ECDC planning, but we do need to be very, very confident that this project has resulted from good governance within East Cambs. And I think probably we need a couple of paragraphs in the next report to reflect that accordingly. Thank you.
Good points, David. Thank you for that. Councillor Terry Rogers, please. Terry.
Thank you, Chair. A very interesting paper, I must admit. And I've noticed there's touched on the costs and that. One thing I would ask the proposers is that they don't just look at the costs of the actual project, but also look at the forecast costs of what happens afterwards. I think many times we lack within the council our capability to forecast things that are happening in the future. And I feel that part of this paper should not only be the actual construction costs, manning costs, etc., but what is going to happen in the future and is it affordable or not in that particular instance. But otherwise, I fully support this.
Thank you. Councillor Peter McDonald. Peter, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, I want to echo what was said before by, I think, Councillor Bowden. This is really a model process and a model paper. In other words, setting out the timetable, giving us heads up of what's coming down the track. So many thanks for that. And then the second quick question, which I'm sure will be covered, just in terms of the procurement process. It's a substantial amount of money. So I assume we'll go through a rigorous procurement process and multiple quotes. Gerdov, I think, was nodding then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's no more. Just one from myself. I think it's very interesting, Gerdov, the 4 points that you raised at the start, and I want to thank you for that. Sorry, I'll come to you in a second, Ian. I think that was I saw a clap come up, not a thumb, but we'll come to you in a second. Thank you. And I think they were very good points, Gerdov, and I think they do focus our minds to the fact that you are coming back. I think you've had some really good feedback as well today, particularly about the timetable. It would be useful in there, and particularly about the quality of your report, which is most welcome. Councillor Ian Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have found the hands now. Thank you for the report. Just a few comments. I know the ex-RAF hospital when it was a RAF hospital, which shows you most probably my age rather than anything else. Okay, so maybe I can put my name down for one of the 80 care suites. Okay. I noticed, for instance, that some of it it's a paragraph 2.4 where you talk about 16 flats will be let out to. I'm assuming you're working with an RSL. Linda may be able to help. I'm assuming you're involved in a local provider or a regional or international provider for a local registered social landlord to develop this project in the future. So I fully support it and thank you for bringing the report. I'm fully aware of care suites. I delivered one, Councillor Rogers and I delivered one about 12 years ago, exactly on this model, by the way, precisely on this model.
Thank you, Ian. I'd just like to add, if Ian's going to get a home at the end of this, I think I should get my name down early, because this was actually the hospital I was born in. So I do know the place rather well. So it's quite interesting. We were asked to note, I think we've duly noted. I'm not seeing any significant objections here. So no, we will accept that, and we will move on. Thank you very much for an excellent report, Gurdev. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we're going to move on to item 7, which is the Alconbury Weald Civic Hub. I've got Andy and Kim. I see Andy on the line. I'm not sure I saw Kim. So Andy, are you there?
I am indeed. Good morning, members. Good morning to those listening in on YouTube as well. So this report is an update on the build out of the new headquarters at Alconbury Weald. In terms of progress, since obviously COVID-19 has had an impact on the scheme, but I'm pleased to report that progress has been very good in recent months, in the last 6 months. And the report talks through the development over the last few months since the report was brought to CNI committee back in July of last year, when a COVID-19 risk contingency was added to the project of 400,000. And you'll see in the report that just over 90% of that has been utilised to date. In terms of review of design and specification of the building in 2.1.2, so COVID-19 has led us to review the design of the building in enhancing the building, particularly with regard to the volume of fresh air intake into the building, ensure a very high quality of transfer of air within the building. The building was already very, very secure from a touch point perspective. So we've also been reviewing that aspect as well, and taking that opportunity at this stage to provide any further improvements from that perspective as well. As I said, progress on site since the initial impacts of COVID-19 back in March of last year has been good. Unfortunately, as you're aware, it has led to a 12-week delay to the programme. That was related to supply chain partners. So there were some specialist subcontractors that in the first lockdown couldn't visit site because they closed down. And also, unfortunately, the manufacture of the glass panels or the glass facade of the building, that also wasn't completed either, because that particular company also closed down for that period of time, which led to that delay. So if it hadn't been for COVID-19, we would be within budget and on programme. But unfortunately, COVID-19 has had that impact. The team are obviously doing the very best they can to claw back some of that lost time. But as you can appreciate, social distancing requirements are still very, very much needing to be adhered to within the building. There are approximately 50 labourers on site every day. So there is a significant amount of activity on the site, but it is being very closely managed in accordance with the restrictions and requirements for working with COVID-19. There will be a period of 6 weeks for handover once the building has been complete by our contractor, RG Carter. So at the moment, as you're aware, we are looking to formally occupy the building from late summer, early autumn of this year. But we, as I've said, we are doing our best to bring that forward wherever possible. Appendix A includes some recent images of the building. As you can see, it is a really exciting project and really coming together now. It's looking fantastic and will be a really great place to work and a real asset to the authority. Moving on to 2.2, future working ambition and early adopters. So as you're aware, COVID-19 has had a worldwide impact, but particularly with regard to how we go about delivering business. A joint strategic recovery board has been set up within the authority in response to the impact of COVID-19. That board has representatives from senior service directors, heads of service. One of the key areas that's being considered is the future working ambition of the authority. So as we are all online now, behaviour has changed for staff. An opportunity is here to work towards different working arrangements. So working from home has become an effective and productive way to carry out many, but not all, activities. So we've actually engaged with staff and spoken to them about the current working and future working. And one of the key things that's come out from that is the desire for more collaborative space to be provided within our buildings, for colleagues to be able to come together with their teams and work together. from that aspect, which is obviously missing at the moment with everybody working remotely. As you've seen, over 70% of staff responded in that manner. So therefore, we need to strike the right balance within our buildings of traditional desk space versus collaborative space, and enable best value from our assets, and allow staff to work in a way that delivers the best possible outcomes. So the Strategic Recovery Board has agreed that some council buildings will be considered as an early adopter. So there are 4 early adopter sites, and clearly one of them is Alconbury, and that those principles would see an increase in formal and informal meeting and collaborative spaces within the buildings. So going from a 5 to 10 ratio, so 5 desks to 10 officers, reducing to 3 desks to 10 officers, to be able to provide more collaborative space within the buildings, which is clearly going to be in significant demand, and deliver that better collaborative environment for staff to be able to come together and work in that manner. So as you're aware, there was 350 desks proposed at Alconbury Weald. That's now reduced by 100 to 250 desks, to be able to create these spaces. And those spaces are located predominantly within the central core of the building for obvious reasons, to create that really high quality collaborative space. And the types of furniture, as members, you will have seen that there's been some consultation on the types of furniture to go in there with members and officers, and that's being finalised at the moment in the design of those spaces. Briefly on cost update, as I've mentioned, the project remains on programme and on budget, within the original 18.337, even including the COVID-19 impacts at this stage. But as you're aware, there is a separate risk contingency allowance for that. And actual expenditure currently stands, as of the 15th of January, at just over £10 million. Briefly on social value, really good figure there. So 96% of the subcontract packages have now been procured, and over 71% of those have been within 50 miles of the site. So £8.1 million has been spent locally on the construction of this project, which is a really good figure to include. In terms of vacating the Shire Hall site, as you are probably aware, will be a short period where Shire Hall will be being decommissioned, won't be usable. The building is obviously currently vacant, with the exception of the Octagon. That there are some officers within the Octagon, but Shire Hall is vacant itself, with officers working remotely. But there will be a contingency of locations where staff that are currently in the Octagon will be able to work within offices elsewhere. But there will be a slight gap between the two, between the vacation of Shire Hall and Alconbury becoming available. But it is clearly down to COVID-19 and the rollout of the vaccine, and when we will be able to return to offices in any case as well. And that obviously is not clear at this stage. And then finally, the building name, you'll see in the recommendation, there is a proposal to name the building New Shire Hall, and the committee are asked to approve the naming of the building as New Shire Hall. That concludes my introduction, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Before I go to questions, I'd just like to make a point myself. I had the good fortune to visit this site on Tuesday with Chief Executive Gillian Beasley. I will be forwarding round to members of this committee the staff update briefing that Gillian has done from Alconbury Weald, New Shire Hall, because I think it shows a fantastic light. Secondly, as soon as COVID restrictions allow, I will be inviting this committee to come and visit the site, because I think it's very important that everybody gets much more of a feel for what's going on out there. And it's an invitation that'll come out probably through Andy and his team to go and have a hosted visit around there. But to be honest with you, with this amount of people on the committee and under the current restrictions, that would not really be conducive for the guys still working. So we've got to wait on that. So any questions on this paper, please? Councillor Linda Jones. Linda, please.
Thank you. I'm interested in the risk register, Andy, because I'm sort of quite surprised by it. I can see, logically you're going through and there are some risks that are crossed out, although the calculation of risk and following the risk mitigation doesn't seem to have kind of changed in other cases. And I was particularly interested in number 2, which was about the contaminated land, because that issue came up earlier on. And the risk doesn't seem to have changed, but I'm assuming now that actually the build out has happened and the car park has happened. And so, you know, wouldn't that risk actually be removed if it's still there, assuming there are residual risks about this? So it's two things really. One is that in some areas, the minimization, the mitigation doesn't seem to have changed the calculation of risk after that mitigation, and although some have been removed. And the second one is particularly the contamination of land, which obviously is a concern for us. There was one other minor issue, which is not strictly a commercial and investment issue, which is I noticed in 213 that you'd actually removed in the revised plan the central staircase on the office side. Now, I remember with my public health background thinking this was a really good thing to have to encourage people not to use elevators, not to use lifts, but to walk up and down. And I just wondered if that meant that the staircase option for staff going up and down stairs was actually removed entirely. But as I said, it's a naughty question to add because it's not really a C&I question.
Over to you, Andy.
Chair, through you. So thank you, Councillor James. So in terms of the risk register, with regard to the ground risk number 2 in terms of potential for contaminated land, so the car park is still under construction. So there are areas of the car park that are still under construction, and particularly with regard to potentially drainage and also landscaping, there is the construction element. So there is still a underlying risk. I suspect that risk, obviously it was rated at 16, it's reduced to 9 following the risk mitigation, and it has a weighted cost of 35,000, so it has quite a low risk allowance to it in reality. But we will certainly keep that under review. I would like to still keep a tolerance of risk at the moment until we actually have absolutely no further construction required in the ground, because I would like to, maybe it seems a little bit risk averse, but I'd rather be risk averse than not have it included with an allowance. In terms of those that don't change between the calculated risk prior to mitigation, so as an example, risk 6 with regard to utilities, whilst we can put mitigations in place, there are some instances where even with mitigation, we feel that the risk is unchanged. So utilities are, as members are aware, quite a challenge to work with in many aspects. So whilst we have put in mitigations, then there may be some instances still where we still want to make sure that we are showing that there is still a significant risk associated with that particular risk, despite the mitigation. And utilities is certainly one of them. In terms of the staircase, yes, unfortunately, we did have to remove the central staircase, which was sort of a feature staircase, but there is still a staircase that is attached to the rear facade of the building. So there is an option to use a staircase or a lift to travel between floors. So from a welfare and exercise and option from that perspective, then certainly people are able to use the stairs still, but it is unfortunate it's not in the centre of the building. It's now on the rear facade.
Thank you, Andy. Peter, please. Peter McDonald.
2 quick things for Andy. I note in there that, Andy, you said a short delay. When I read that, I assumed that looks like 6 weeks. In other words, between the time that Shire Hall is vacated and the building here could be occupied. So I don't know if Andy can pin that down a little bit further. I'm not trying to put him on the spot. I'm just trying to get an idea. And with regard to the naming, I'm pleased we decided, despite our esteemed leader, that we didn't call it County Hall. I just wonder, even at this late stage, whether it's worth considering, a Captain Sir Tom Moore Hall or another name. I just throw that in there to consider, because presumably we still have time to decide that instead of use Shire Hall. Thank you.
Chair, just to answer the question to Councillor McDonald on the delay. So despite the fact that obviously the final sale of Shire Hall doesn't go through until after May, there is a significant period of decommissioning works to do within the building itself, which will take place from May. So there is a period of time, despite the fact that Shiloh Hall hasn't been disposed of, where officers still won't be able to work within the building because there is still some decommissioning work to do. So my understanding, which Chris Mullion may be able to also add to, but is that towards the end of May will be the time when officers wouldn't be able to work within the building. Obviously, they aren't working within the building at the moment within Shiloh Hall itself. And at this stage, we are looking at sort of during August, where we would start to move into the new building, starting to move equipment into the building itself in a staged introduction of officers to be working fully early September. But as I've said, we are trying to bring that forward as much as we possibly can with the site team, and I can assure you the contractor is doing all it can to be able to do that with those challenges. But we have got a contingency in place during that period, so that the impact will be as minimal as possible on officers and obviously the service delivery.
Okay, thank you. Chris, I assume you want Chris Mullion, that is, to come in on that point. Sorry, Chris Bowden, I haven't lost your hand. It's fine.
Yes, Chairman. Thank you. Through you. I mean, just I didn't know Andy was going to give the exact date. So yes, I can confirm that the current profile current plan is that the premises will start to be decommissioned with effect from the end of May. So there will effectively be just around 3 months period where we do not have headquarters. We're not expecting, actually, given the current COVID situation, and albeit it's starting to alleviate, that we will be back in operation during that period anyway, albeit there may be some relaxation towards the end. So yes, it's 3 months maximum.
Okay, thank you. Peter, if I can, well, I'll come back to the name in a second. I'll just take a couple of more comments, then we'll perhaps have a quick discussion on the name. Chris Bowden, please, you were next.
Chairman, this building project has been rather different from most in that it has been very severely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis. And that crisis in itself has also, I think, influenced some of the ways in which we seek to have the building built and how it's going to be used in the future. So it's not the usual way in which building control takes place so far as a project like this is concerned. I look at the change in specifications that there are at this stage, and there have been previous changes in specification as well. And one of the bugbears of efficient construction cost mitigation is change in specification. Now, in this case, in some cases here, we have changes in specification for very good reason, even though they are in the middle of the project. But I think that overall, it is something which we do need to look at and look at quite carefully. The figures that we had for contingencies had been increased by 400,000, of course, so went to a total of 1.463 million. And we still have 565,000 of that left. And it will be interesting to see how much of that is utilized. But that figure of 1.463 million, which I do admit does include the COVID-19 figure, it does represent 8.5% of expected costs, which is a quite high contingency figure for any project to have. And I'll be interested to see just how well we have managed this in terms of contingency. The danger with contingency is always that it can be seen as an acceptable cost overrun. It can, in certain circumstances, be seen that way. And it's important that we will not have allowed that to have happened. So this is a very big project, but it's not the only big project that county has had to finance in the past and will have to finance and manage in the future. So what I think would be extremely useful, Chairman, if you could give some consideration to this, would be if 6 months after the handover takes place, we have a full financial review of the construction of this project and of the financing of the project, so that we can understand the lessons to be learned where things didn't go right, and also to recognize where things went right because we did it in the right way. And 6 months after handover seems to give enough time for things to bed in and for us to then be able more objectively to view the project as a whole, both construction and finance, so that we as a committee, and I hope the County Council, can learn what lessons need to be learned from both what went right and what didn't go quite so right so far as this project is concerned. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I take that on board. Councillor David Jenkins. David, please.
Thank you, Mark. Interesting, and thank you, Andy, for the update. I've been on this council for coming up to 16 years, and this as a project is one of a handful which might be regarded as substantial, multi-million, etc. And I think, as far as I can recall, it's the only one that's been managed so well. You know, we are actually coming in as far as we could reasonably expect, on budget and on time. So all credit there. When you look at all the other big projects in that period of time, we've screwed up regally. So well done, Andy, and your team, and thank you. It's nice to see you wearing a tie to make the presentation today as well. Very professional. Okay. I recognize when we started this, we designed a building which had a bunch of offices with some meeting space. Then Andy has had to adjust this to fewer offices and a bit more meeting space. And I'm wondering when we'll get to the stage of recognizing that what COVID has introduced us to is not a trend, but a discontinuity. And what perhaps we need is a bunch of meeting space with just a small number of offices, at which point in time that challenges the accepted wisdom as to whether we need this building at all. We might well find us in a situation the emperor has no clothes. We've got a wonderful building, well engineered, ready there, but do we need it? I do have some concerns that, and it is right that we allow more meeting space, but how many people are going to travel significant distances for one meeting and then travel significant distances back? We've got big concerns about access to this site. We've got a bus service coming out of Cambridge, but that is geared to a working day. It's not geared to people attending occasional meetings. So at some point or another, and to some extent, this affects the choice of name. We do need to address the fact of, do we really need this building? And I'm presuming you'll come back to us for more comments about the name later, Mark?
Yeah, I did say that. Yeah, we'll do that in a second.
So I would note the quality of the engineering work and say absolutely well done. But you know, is there an elephant in the room, guys? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Ian Bates, please.
I'd just like to also, I have my tie on. I notice some members don't, which includes the chairman, by the way, and you, David. Okay. I refer you to King's Dyke, actually. Maybe you need to look at what's happening at King's Dyke, David. Okay, to see your comment about on time, on budget, etc. Because actually what you've just said is not correct in relationship to King's Dyke. I'd like to ask a question about vacant Shire Hall, I think, when we do come out, because obviously the Octagon is still being used. I think you mentioned, Andy, 4 other buildings when there's going to be this sort of after May to September period. Where are those other buildings, please?
Chair, I think the 4 other buildings was in relation to the early adopters. So there are 4 other, well, I think there are 4 buildings in total that will be early adopters. So some of the others are the spokes buildings in terms of reducing the number of desks and increasing the collaborative space. That was the reference to the other buildings, I think, Councillor Bates.
Sorry, Andy, I was thinking when you say the other buildings, I'm a little bit. What are they? Ones that I know, you know, everybody else knows, or what? I'm not. Where are they?
I'm not aware of the list. I can certainly update the committee on what the other early adopters sites are. I'm aware that Alcon Wheel is an early adopter, but there are other spokes buildings that will be early adopters. I don't know if Chris, if you're aware of, Chris Marlin is aware of the other early adopters sites.
I'll bring Chris in a minute. He has raised his hands. Chris, do you want to come in now, Chris Mallion?
Thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy to send the list to the committee members outside of the meeting. So I think that there are, I think CPDC is definitely one, and the building at Papworth is also another one, but I can't remember what the 4th one is. So I'll send the full list outside of the meeting, Jim.
Okay. That brings us round back to the name.
Sorry, Chairman. Can I just pick up? So my hand was up not for responding to that question. It was actually responding to Councillor Jenkins' question regarding whether we'll have a building that we actually need. And I think that it's certainly true that the evolution of the sites that we're now developing in this new model have been predicated based on the working experience that the workforce have encountered as a result of COVID. What we're to counterbalance that, I think it's fair to say that we're also seeing quite a significant amount of welfare issues with our workforce who are constantly working from home, and that's causing stresses to their well-being. So I think we just need to be careful about what messaging we're sending. We certainly think that the way that we deliver services in the future will differ from what it was prior to COVID. But I think talking about not having a need for headquarters is no, Councillor Jenkins wasn't saying this, but would be premature. We certainly, I think, would need to learn the experiences ongoing, but also being cognizant of the well-being of our workforce, because many do need somewhere to attend. I think the point about travelling for a meeting is one that's well made, and I think I'm sure both members and staff will be looking at their diaries in order they don't just travel to Alconbury for a single meeting, that they work their days in attendance around the meeting diaries, etc. And I think the other thing we also need to be cognizant of is of the 600 odd staff that will be moving to Alconbury, only 100 of them live in Cambridge. The rest live around the county. So I know the focus is on the movement of staff because that's where our headquarters is, in Cambridge at the moment. But actually the vast majority of the workforce who travel to Shire Hall do not live in Cambridge. Thank you, Chairman.
Before we go on to having a quick discussion about the name, I'd just like to reiterate something that you said there, Chris. As I said to you, as a member, if I'm lucky enough to be a member in the future, I live on the West Suffolk border. I'm about as far away in Cambridgeshire as I can be from Alconbury Weald. If I'm going to take a journey to Alconbury Weald, then the chances are I'm going to use some of these dropout desks and collaboration centres areas in the building to make my stay worthwhile, and therefore be there for a minimum of half a day, if not a whole day. And that's the beauty of this, and that's the option that staff will have as well. It's very difficult because I feel very lucky and privileged that I've literally walked around this building just 2 days ago, and it does change your minds a little bit. So I'm hoping I can bring that opportunity to you guys as soon as possible, because I think it will help allay some of these fears. I think also Councillor Jenkins does make some good points. When the decisions were made to build this building, it was then. We haven't got a degree in hindsight. Where we're making these decisions now, it would be very different, I'm sure. But what we have got, I'd like to bring to the fore again, 3 aspects of any project: time, cost, and quality. Time, cost, we're just about bang on with this, through absolutely no chance of avoiding ourselves. And I'm attesting for the quality, which you will all see when you get the opportunity. So moving on to the second part of this, there's a proposal that the building be named New Shire Hall. I note that Councillor, Peter McDonald put a suggestion up there of something like, a Sir Tom building, etc., etc. There's a couple of points there. A great man that Sir Tom was. He really hasn't got a great deal of links to Cambridgeshire, other than being, I think, the chairman of a company that operated out in the Fenland area. And I can't help feeling that there will be 500 Sir Tom buildings up and down the country in the next 6 to 12 months. The timescales on this, Andy, I mean, in terms of signage and actual naming and everything, what leeway have we got on time of this?
Chairman, I think it's basically linked to the manufacture of the sign itself. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact definitive date without speaking to the contractor, but I would like to think that we've probably got a month's grace in making the decision potentially, but not much more than that, because we obviously want the sign to be manufactured and complete for when the building is commissioned.
I mean, I don't want to lead this. I actually like the name New Shire Hall. I think it's simple and clear, and it says exactly what it says on the tin. You know, that doesn't mean to say that I'm absolutely right on it. So if anybody has got not so much other ideas to throw in the pot, because as Andy's just said, time is quite tight on it, but maybe an idea of a process as to how we get to the end, because nothing will take longer than having a debate over opinions on something like this. It will go on forever and ever, and then nobody will say, well, that's not the name that I wanted. So Terry, you've raised your hand. Do you want to come in on this?
It's a simple point I'd like to make. I think a building's name should reflect its function. People around Cambridgeshire, if you say Shire Hall, know exactly what Shire Hall is about, what happens there, hopefully, and the fact that it's the point of reference they need to go if they need particular questions answered. In my mind, Shire Hall is perfectly acceptable.
Okay, thank you. David Jenkins.
Chair, I just don't really want to dignify this proposal with any sort of comment and just let it go. But I just asked the question. We've seen a graphic of the sign of the building. I presume that will be branded Cambridgeshire County Council.
Andy, can you come in on that?
Yeah, Chairman, yes, that will certainly be branding that it is Cambridgeshire County Council within that building.
Otherwise, it won't be clear what the function of the building is.
Yeah, okay, take that. Well, look, we're not seeing any more comments on it. Peter, did you want to come back?
Could I say, if I may, in response, that sorry, Chair, to interrupt, but many people don't see graphics or the like of that. They associate the name with the name. They pass on the name. They say Shire Hall. People immediately associate it being Cambridge County Council. But I won't argue. I
think we've got 2 points here. Let's move on from that. I think as you approach the building, it will be definite that it's the name of the building, and it would definitely be that it's Cambridgeshire County Council. The other aspects here are a bit different. Peter McDonald, you brought up the suggestion of a possible alternative name. Did you want to come back on that?
Not really, Chair, but thanks for asking.
Okay.
I just felt it was the appropriate time and the appropriate place to ask the question. Of course, there would always debates of this person or that person or the other person, whether it's suitable. So no, it's fine. Thank you.
Yeah. As you can see from guitars behind me, I used to play in bands. It used to take us longer to name them. We stayed together. So that was always an interesting one. What we're being asked to do is to note the construction progress development to date, which remains within the approved budget. I think it's fair to say that we've noted that, and we've got to consider and approve the proposed name for the building as New Shire Hall. If anybody would like to go to the vote on that rather than taking it as is, could you just raise your hand now? I'm quite happy to go to the vote if we want to, or I'm not seeing any objections to it. We will accept it and the name as New Shire Hall. Right, okay, that's carried. Thank you very much for that. And thank you very much, Andy, for a very comprehensive and I'll echo professional report. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to the next item then. This is the review of retirement age of farming tenants with farm business tenancies granted under the Agricultural Tenancies Act 1995. Tony, are you introducing this report?
I'm indeed, Chair, yes. So this report builds on the Rural Estate Strategic Review, which this committee approved back in February 2020. In that review, it considered the retirement age of farm tenants, county farm tenants under the Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies, which was under the 1986 Act. The farm business tenancies being referred to in this paper are the more modern form of agricultural tenancies, and as a result of changes to the state pension ages, created a number of anomalies which we're looking to address. Traditionally under county farms and under the Agricultural Holdings Act tenancies, the older tenancies, there was a general sort of policy and expectations that farm tenants would retire at age 65, which is the traditional sort of or historic retirement age. With the advent of farm business tenancies, which are more like a conventional commercial property tenancy, which are fairly open-ended and lacking indeed, not covering matters such as succession and retirement, we have been granting farm business tenancies which expire generally prior to the age of 65 or the state pension age, in line with county farm policies. This has the potential to, with the changes in state pension age increasing from 65 upwards, 66, 67, and potentially later with changes in government pension policy. This potentially creates not only an anomaly, but potentially an income gap for some of our tenant farmers where their tenancies expire prior to whatever the state pension age is, and therefore their entitlement to a state pension income. So we've looked at the options around this. The essence of it is that we are looking for the policy to ensure we can grant, where a tenant requests it, an extension in their tenancy up until the October of the year that they reach the state pension age, regardless of what that state pension age may be at the relevant time. We've considered three options on the paper. One is to do nothing and continue as we are. That obviously continues the anomaly between the two types of tenancies and the risk to the gaps, the income gap for retiring tenants. Secondly is to allow tenants to extend their tenancies beyond 65. We've covered this in principle under the review from last year, which current policy is that where a tenant requests it, we will consider an extension or a new tenancy rather for up to 3 years beyond their existing tenancy, where that isn't counted to the strategic requirements of the farm's estate. The third option, which is the one that we're recommending in this paper, is where a tenancy is expiring prior to age 65 or the state pension age, we will grant a new farm business tenancy up to the October of the year they become entitled to that, entitled to state pension. So those are the three options. It's our recommendation that we align both farm business tenancies and the older Agricultural Act tenancies. The government has essentially confirmed this position in terms of the older tenancies by amending the Agricultural Holdings Act with the Agriculture Act last year. So we are simply bringing the two types of tenancies into line. We are also conscious that there may be equality issues or concerns regarding this policy. So as you'll see at the back of the paper on section 5.4, page 53, we have talked through those concerns in detail, and I'll just highlight the key points. Firstly, these are commercially negotiated tenancies. They're not a form of employment, so we're not in the realms of employment law. However, under the Equalities Act and in respect of age discrimination, the Equalities Act does refer to public functions, and clearly we're a public body engaged in public functions, and therefore the rules in respect of age discrimination do apply. It does allow differences in the treatment of people according to age within the Equalities Act based on what is described as the objective justification, and it is in simple terms where there are positive and valid reasons for doing so. And we believe in this case that there are positive and valid reasons for bringing them in line and in line with government policies under the Agricultural Holdings Act. I've detailed the rationale behind it. In terms of the legal position, we have previously taken legal advice because of the non-specific nature of the legislation in relation to age discrimination. The legal advice is very clear that every individual case would have to be considered on its merits. So we don't consider the policy as it stands to be discriminatory. And in any event, we have to look at an individual tenant's request when it is made at the time and take advice at that time. So whether we agree to the policy or not, it remains very much a case-by-case basis, and that is the nature of the legislation. And the final point is to make clear that state pension age has been equalised between men and women, and therefore there is no gender equality issues in respect to the policy because men and women will be treated equally. So that's my synopsis of the paper, Chair. If there are any questions in relation to that, happy to take them.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Thank you for presenting that. Yeah, we've got a few questions. If you raise your hand, if you've got any questions, please. Chris Bowden, if you lead, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and thank you, Tony, for that introduction. I found the section on equality and diversity very useful indeed. Thank you very much indeed for that. I did notice in paragraph 5.4.4 the very careful wording from officers that it is argued that the scheme that we are putting forward meets the objective justification criteria. And quite clearly, it's being argued that it does, but it isn't actually certain that it does. So I was interested in seeing in 5.4.5 that legal advice has been previously sought that advised each case would be judged on its merits and, if necessary, determined by a court, as the statute doesn't provide clear guidance, but that each individual case would be decided upon its merits in terms of any renewal of individual tenancies. And I have a little bit of uncertainty about this. Are we saying that there isn't going to be an absolutely firm policy that every tenancy must end at the age of 68? Or are we saying that we will be looking at each individual case and deciding it upon its merits when a renewal of an individual tenancy comes up? I think clarification of that point is very important. I know farming is a very hard job, but farmers are also a very hardy breed. And I would be concerned if we do have farmers who are coming up towards the retirement age and who wished to carry on beyond that statutory retirement age for some period of time, and who are capable of doing so and fulfilling all of the requirements of the tenancy. I'd be a little bit concerned if we were forcing them out, because the old concept of getting up to a certain age and then just stopping your business or employment or occupation, that is very much old thinking rather than new thinking. However, I don't know if I'm talking completely out of turn here, because I've no idea what our own tenants think about this. And what struck me about the report is there isn't a single thing in here about consultation with the tenants and whether the tenants themselves can't wait to get to retirement or would be concerned about this the continued imposition of what's effectively a retirement age. Has there been any consultation with our tenants at all about this?
Tony.
Yep, a number of points. So in terms of the legal issue, it's the nature of the legislation, which there is this kind of dichotomy between the fact the legislation is unclear and we can set a policy, but that policy will need to be tested in the individual circumstances on each occasion. So I'm comfortable that we are going to obtain further legal advice in relation to the policy, but it's the application of the policy in the individual case, which is where the discrimination may arise, not the policy itself. So it's, dare I say, not ideal in terms of the legislation. Perhaps could have been clearer or given us a clearer steer. It is a case-by-case basis. So we're balancing the two items. We will have a policy. It's then the deployment of that policy which will determine the situation. In terms of statutory retirement age, it's been a long-standing policy under county farms, county small holdings, that as a general rule, there is an expectation of retirement at retirement age. That's written into the Agricultural Holdings Act. And as I say, it's written into the strategic review of the farms estate that was agreed by this committee last year. It can be reviewed. And as we say, we have built in potential for farmers or tenants to continue beyond retirement age within the existing policy. And our expectation is that we would continue to do that again on a case-by-case basis where it is requested. So I would stress, we are talking about ending tenancies. We are not forcing a farmer into retirement as such. I appreciate that leaving a farm that they may have been on for a very long period of time, it may be de facto retirement. I'm quite alive to that. But I think we need to be clear that this is around the commercial aspects of managing the agricultural estate rather than forcing people to retire specifically. But there is potentially a debate that could be had in terms of whether that policy, although as I say, it's still written into the latest agricultural legislation that went through Parliament last year, is still appropriate going forward, given the changes you've spoken about. In terms of tenant consultation, we haven't consulted directly with tenants on this at the moment because we are aligning the farm business tenancies with the existing Agricultural Holdings Act legislation and our own policies, but it's something we can do. So coming back to my earlier comment in terms of whether retirement is the option, but bearing in mind that part of the rationale for county farms was to encourage new entrants into agriculture, and noting that current DEFRA policies, including providing lump sums towards to older farmers to potentially retire, is in line with government policy and current trends from external bodies in relation to agriculture.
Chairman, may I just ask if it just seems to be good practice for us to discuss matters with our tenants and to consult with them. I'm not saying that that needs to happen before this policy is decided upon, but I think that officers do need to know what our tenants feel and think, and consulting on matters such as this, I think, is very good as a matter of principle.
Yeah, I mean, I can add a little bit on that. Also, as the farms champion, I'm very, very aware how the whole team do interact daily, weekly, hourly, almost with our tenants. And in fact, I've been personally involved in some discussions recently with third parties that involved our tenants. So it is an ongoing process. I think this is really about a leveling up, if you like, in as much as if somebody'd got a tenancy that was running out at the age of 65 or 63 or whatever it is, then providing that they still have the means to be a tenant, that's a point that we have to add, then what we're saying is that they have the rights to go for another tenancy up to their retirement age, which is still fluid. It could be 66, 67, 68, depending upon their age. So, you know, I broadly welcome the paper. I think it's a good idea, and actually I think it will be well received, if not has been well received by virtually all of our tenants anyway. Okay, well, we were being asked, the report recommendation was to approve an amended policy so that agricultural tenants are given the opportunity to apply for a new FBT that takes them to the year in which they reach state pension age or thereabouts, with an end date of October to match the recognised end of the farming year. I'm not seeing any objections to this. I think we've got general agreement on this. If there are any objections, if you could raise your hand now. Otherwise, we'll take that as a unanimous vote in favour of that recommendation. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for the report again, Tony and your colleagues there.
Thanks, Chair.
Now, is there a need at this stage, before we go on to item 9, this land, for a quick comfort break, or is everybody okay to push on through? I'm seeing a few nods. Could we just take a quick comfort break then, and maybe get back here at 11:25, if that's okay? Just take a quick comfort break. Thank you. Right, I'll make that 11:25. Linda, if you're there, could you flip your camera back on for us, please? Lovely, perfect. Thank you very much. Right, I can see all the members are back. Right, so we'll move on to this land update. So I've got a bit tongue-tied there. Chris Mallion, I believe you're introducing this report for us.
I am, Chairman. The contents of the report are fairly self-explanatory. The key reason for bringing the report to the committee today is to note the change in the accounting period for the company, which is bringing it in line with the County Council, which will, I think, save both of ourselves and the company itself some challenges that we had in having differing accounting periods, which does mean that for this year, the accounting period for the company will be a 15-month period rather than the standard 12-month as you would normally see. We've also taken the opportunity to update the committee on a couple of other matters, one regarding the change to the leadership of the company, which I'm sure members will have some views on, but is probably a matter for more detailed discussion with the shareholder quarterly meeting that we'll be having in the near future. And we've also updated the committee on the debt outstanding, which follows on from the report which we gave in October of last year. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that. Members, can you raise your hand if you've got any questions on this paper, please, or this subject? Okay, Councillor Linda Jones. Linda, you were first up, please.
Thank you, and thanks for this report, Chris. I mean, it is very much a selective update because from the public's point of view, this is a housing company, yet there isn't any update on the number of houses that have been built. And, one would have reasonably expected that to be given. So is that something you could tell us now or something you could follow up later?
Chairman, through you, I'm happy to follow up later. I don't have those details to hand, but I'm more than happy to do so outside of the meeting.
Chris, if I could just add, and I might be able to help you with that and answer Linda's point. I am very aware that the new CEO has released a press release to the local press. I think it was yesterday or maybe even this morning, and that actually has all of that information in it. So it's obviously come too late to be added to this, but that would be a very easy document and good document to share around.
I'm happy to do so, Chairman. I do have that update. Unfortunately, I haven't actually physically got it in front of me, so I will circulate it to the committee outside of the meeting.
Thank you for that. Peter, please. Peter McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of things. Obviously, residents would ask the question, given the loan position, 112 million, and thanks to Chris for updating. It's a huge amount of money. I know that in confidential session we have looked at sites, which I'm not going to refer to now. So my first question, and I'm not trying to put Chris on the spot, and this is really a request for further clarification later on, is what the glide path looks like in terms of the council's return on that money, because it's such a huge amount of money. If we're not careful, this land will become Neverland in terms of our return. I know Chris will say that in terms of the borrowing costs and the interest costs that this land is returning according to plan to the council. And I don't doubt at all what Chris is reporting and others. It just doesn't feel totally comfortable still with such a large amount outstanding. So that was my first sort of observation. And then I suppose just feel a bit uncomfortable. The chief executive has changed. This committee wasn't aware of those changes. I know that this land is an independent entity, and of course it legally has the right to do that. And the successor to the previous chief executive is from within the existing management team. That may be fantastic. That may be a great thing. I've no idea. I suppose it feels somehow that maybe the running of this land will be business as usual rather than any significant change to bring a return to the council, but I just leave that there as a couple of observations. I don't know if Chris can make a comment. Thank you.
Chairman, through you, I'm happy to make a comment on the debt outstanding. I think that using the terminology that Councillor MacDonald used, the glide path. I mean, they are matters, obviously, for the detailed discussions with the shareholder, which we have on a quarterly basis, and that's around how confident the shareholder is in terms of the delivery against the business plan. In that public statement that Councillor Goldsack referred to, I think the acting chief executive has referred to or made a comment along the lines of a profit will be seen in the, I think the exact word is in the near future. Now that is obviously dependent on a number of issues which I don't particularly want to go into the detail during this meeting, but it is something obviously that we would want to get into more detail with in the shareholder meeting and get under those numbers. But we are, and again, sorry, coming back to Councillor Goldsack's suggestion that I might use this, Councillor MacDonald's suggestion I might use this phrase. I mean, they are repaying the making payments on their loan debt in accordance with the request from the council. So at this stage, we have no reason to doubt that they wouldn't continue to service their financial loans to the council. And I say that's probably something that we want to go into more detail with in terms of how aligned they are actual activity against their business plan in the next quarterly meeting. But at this point, I've got no reason to suggest to the committee that they won't deliver against their business plan. In terms of the issue around the chief executive, Chairman, I don't think I'm in a position to comment on the detailed operations of the management team. That's a matter for the board and the shareholder to raise with the board in terms of that engagement.
The only thing I could add to that of any significance is, I think you touched on it, Councillor MacDonald, which is that David Lewis, who is now the acting or interim, shall we say, CEO, is an internal replacement. So effectively, the costs of the outgoing CEO have left the organisation. So they've, at this moment in time, there is no replacement for that. So that is a net saving to them at least in the short term, maybe in the long term. That's up to them as a board to determine. Right, we'll move on to David, please. David Jenkins.
Thank you, Mark. First of all, I guess I need to make an apology because I was perhaps one of several people that had asked you to put this on the agenda. I was not smart enough to ask you to invite one of our 2 county council nominated directors to come along and talk to us at the same time. I don't know if they were invited. I don't know if they're aware of this item on the agenda, but it is nonetheless disappointing that they have not shown this committee the respect which I would expect. Now, I know that this land is operating within the law and according to their statutes, etc. But I would note that Cambridgeshire County Council is a 100% shareholder in this land, and the shareholders' rights are flow through to the County Council through this committee. And generally speaking, when directors and companies ignore their shareholders, they tend to receive their comeuppance at annual meetings when they're up for re-election. So I'm really disappointed that we do not have those directors here to talk to us, to explain what's going on, because I heard about Dave Gelling leaving from the BBC. They rang me up over the weekend. It is not the way I should be informed about the chief executive of a 100% owned by the county council company moving on. It's not the way it should happen. We should have received that information directly ourselves. Now, there's still a lot of questions to be asked about this, because I noticed David Gelling is not serving out his time. Well, if he's leaving of his own volition, then why are we paying him for a period of his notice and not getting value out of him? Or if he's leaving because we want him to leave in a hurry, what is the reason? and we might have got some answers from our executive and non-executive directors had they come along. I would note that David Lewis, is it David Lewis? Yeah, or Mr. Lewis anyway.
David, yeah.
Is interim, so he has not been promoted into the role of chief executive yet. I'd like to understand what the process is for confirmation and whether or not, legal niceties aside, whether or not this committee will be involved in that in the same way that we were involved with the first appointment of David Gelling. I'm very uncomfortable about this because we all felt that David Gelling was doing a good job, didn't we, around this room? I don't remember at any of the shareholder meetings anybody asking any aggressive questions of him or being critical of him. So very strange circumstances, and we are still in the dark, and we're 100% shareholders. And they have 100 million quid of our money, remember, and that's public money, and that's not good news. I noticed the change of the accounting year, and I can understand the common sense to that, but why has it taken us so long to realize that we have a municipal year and they have another year? All of a sudden, this is suddenly come along to us. Maybe there's nothing sinister about it, in which case, fine, I'm really pleased. But I am aware that the HMRC and people like that tend to be suspicious of companies that change their accounting years, especially when they do it a second time. Don't shake your head, Chris Bowden, they do get suspicious. So we've had our one strike, the next one we can't do. So I'd like some comment about that, please. Third point, well, item 1.4, financing. Let's just remember they do have over 100 million pounds of our money. Thank you.
Chris, do you want to come back, please?
I mean, the only one issue I want to come back to, Chairman, is to completely confirm to the committee that there is no suspicious nature of the change in the accounting period. No, this, why is it taking this long? I mean, it hasn't taken this long. Clearly, we've been aware that we have differing accounting periods since the company has started trading. In fact, in some ways, I think that originally was more driven by the company wishing to almost differentiate itself from the local authority. It has sort of transpired, not transpired, but when given the level of the activity now within the company, having a different accounting period for the shareholder who's wholly owned and therefore has to subsume the accounts of the company within theirs is becoming more and more complicated, and it is just more simple to align the two. And there's nothing untoward about it. No, it's just for practical reasons, that's all.
Okay, thank you. David, on the essence of, on the point of the chief executive deciding to leave this land, I know no more than you do at this juncture. I take the point you did ask for this to come. Maybe I should take responsibility. I didn't think to ask either Councillor Schumann or Steve Cox, who are our two representatives now on the board. I didn't think to ask them to today's meeting. So that's an oversight on my part. So I'll apologise for that. There are two options here. I'm more than happy to invite them to give an update at a future one of these meetings, which is a regular occurrence anyway. But don't forget, we've also got the option where we have an observer role at the board meeting of this land, and we can rotate a member of this committee through that. I know that Councillor Shellens has been, I've been, I think Councillor Roberts has been, Rogers has been, sorry. So there's still that option. There's still that option as well. So I very much welcome people that want to do that, and I can make that happen. I am also aware, if you haven't done already, I know Linda, you expressed an interest to be that observer at some point as well, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. So I'll take that forward. I'm going to go to the next questions, please.
If I may just quickly come back.
Yes, please.
I accept Chris's statement, and I wouldn't expect any less. So that's fine. Thank you. We've got that on the record. Asking the non-execs to come to our next meeting is a bit of shutting the stable door after the horses have bolted. It'll be too far in the future. But I think there is a principle here. And I suspect, by the way, that this land spent quite a lot of money on corporate communications, in which case, why didn't somebody there think to tell the shareholders, we've got £100 million of their money. It's probably a good idea to tell them what's happening before they hear from the press. And I wondered if our recommendation should include a note of concern that this committee learnt about the changes from the media and not from its own contacts within the company.
I'm really not sure that that's the case, David. I think you may have heard from the BBC, but I think to be fair, Chris Mallion, we were notified, weren't we, before this has gone out to the press?
I don't know when it went to the press, Chairman, so I'm not sure I can comment on that, to be honest.
I kind of understood from what David was saying that he was notified last weekend.
I know Councillor Jenkins actually rang me over the weekend as I was trying to mend my fence, as he will recall, and I had been made aware at that juncture, but I don't know when the BBC or other members of the press were informed about the change.
I think in many ways we may be a victim here of at the last month's meeting it was proposed that at the December meeting it was proposed. I apologise, I'll start that again. At the January pre-meeting, it was proposed that because there was a whole page of notes and how busy our officers were, we wouldn't have a January meeting. I believe the information about the resignation of David Gelling was before that meeting, and that may well have come up at that meeting had we had it, but we didn't have that meeting. This is the next time. Now, we shouldn't have to wait entirely for meetings for updates. There's media's there's emails and means that we can send around updates. So for that, I apologise. I've also personally been out of action for about a week or so. So again, I think that's had an impact on this. I take your very valid point, David, on maybe Councillor Schumann and Steve Cox could or should have been invited to today's meeting. I will take that on board and I apologise for that. That's an oversight on my part, as I said. But I think I'd just like to go back to two things. And this is, you know, it's an accountancy thing. I think we can accept that the end of the year change. It's purely, I think, it's going to lessen the workload on our financial team, and that, you know, that's to be applauded. In terms of the decision on who's leading this company, yes, as a shareholder, we've been informed, maybe not widely enough, but it's still the limited company's objective. It's still their responsibility to make those decisions.
I think
we've got a few more.
Company's responsibility is to recognise the interests of their shareholders.
I've got my hand up. Is it not time, please, to move on and have other people to speak?
I hear what you're saying, Ian. I hear what you're saying. I'll give David this last point, please, David.
All right. Sorry, I'll try not to be guilty of last wordism. We are 100% shareholders. They do have 100 million quid's worth of public money. I think we deserve the respect of prompt communication.
Okay, I'd like to make one more point on that, and you're absolutely, your point is taken, and I note it, and I will speak to them about it. We keep always talking about the money that's loaned them, and that's right, and that's valid, and that's proper. What nobody ever talks about is the assets that this company is holding, right, and the assets value that they've increased on the assets that they're holding through planning permissions gained. And I think there's a real correlation there that is often forgotten. Sometimes I think for effect, but you know, I think we're going to move on from this now. Actually, yeah, Ian, you were next. Ian Bates, please.
It's really a comment to Councillor Jenkins. He asked for this report to go on, so why did he not invite the two members who represent this council on that board to attend today?
I think we've covered that one. Thank you, Ian. Chris Bowden, please.
You've covered it. Why did Councillor Jenkins, who asked for the report to be put on this agenda, contact the two people and in conjunction with yourself? Why did he not take this forward himself?
Do you want to come back on that one, David?
I think I tendered that apology earlier, didn't I?
Okay, right. We'll move on. Thanks for raising that. Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. Chris Bowden, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have been reviewing the various companies, Companies House, and the various information which is available on there. And I apologise for being so impolite as to shake my head when Councillor Jenkins was talking, but he was 100% wrong in what he was saying. And the reason he was wrong in what he was saying is that it's the exact opposite which is true. The authorities, in particular HMRC, are particularly suspicious when a group of companies have different accounting year ends, because there are all sorts of complications which exist in consolidating accounts when you do have different year ends, and it also leads the unscrupulous to be able to push all sorts of things through one company instead of another in order to manipulate figures. And that's why the Companies Act actually has a provision which specifically allows, exceptionally, a second change of accounting period in order to consolidate all of the accounting periods of a group. So I'm sorry to have shaken my head when you were speaking, Councillor Jenkins, but you did get that completely the wrong way round. But the reason I had put my hand up was just to ask, if I may, Chris Mallion, if he can give any information about the subsidiaries of This Land Limited and whether any of those have yet started trading, or are they all still dormant? That is This Land Finance Limited, This Land Development Limited, This Land Asset Management Limited, and This Land Investment Limited.
Through you, Chairman, they're not all dormant, but they primarily are. But I'll rather than me try to make assumptions around what activity has been processed through any of those subsidiaries, I'll get a detailed paper to the committee.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, don't see any more hands on this subject. The report recommendation was the Commercial Investment Committee is invited to note this report and confirm, excuse me, I just lost the screen, and confirm the change in This Land's accounting date. I think I'm probably fair in saying that there was a general consensus at the end of that in the change of the accounting date. There was maybe some concerns over other issues. So are we happy, Chris Mallion, you've got your hand up.
Chairman, I didn't realise Tom was actually watching the meeting this morning, but he's just sent me a note. So thank you for Tom remotely. That the Finance Limited is active and are processing the loans, so that there are 2 dormant companies.
Okay, then. Well, before I go to wrap up, Linda, you've got your hand up now.
Yeah, well, given that Tom is here at the meeting, I'm just wondering if we could have a statement. You raised the issue, Mark, about about assets and the assets of the company. I know the company has been selling off some of those assets, and that has helped to, if I can call it in general terms, balance the books. But the key issue for me is that this is a housing company, and it would be reasonable to understand how many dwellings have been built by this company over the last 3 years, 4 years.
I think that's a very fair question, Linda, and I think we did answer earlier that will be circulated. We haven't. And can I just point out, Tom is not actually at this meeting. I believe Tom is watching this meeting on the live YouTube thing, so he won't be able. That is correct, Chairman. He won't be able to speak at it. So apologies for that. But we will get that report pushed around to the committee members, Linda. And as I say, that actually comes straight from This Land. It's not us interpreting what they're telling us. That's straight from This Land. Okay, so I'll just go over that again then. The recommendation is to note this report and confirm the change of This Land's accounting date. If anybody has a major issue with that and would like to go to the vote, can you please raise your hand? I'm not seeing any hands, so we will pass that as unanimous. Thank you very much, Dawn. I'm sure you've noted that. Thank you for that, and thank you for Chris for covering that report. We're going to move on to Commercial Investment Committee Finance Monitoring Report. Justine, you've been waiting very patiently. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so this is the report as at the end of December. As you know, CNI has a negative net budget as the income targets exceed the expenditure targets. So an overall net budget of just over 9 million. And the latest position as at the end of December is a forecast underachievement of income of 2.6 million. And that's a change of just 147,000 from the November report. In fact, it's changed very little since back in May. And most of that pressure, of course, is about the commercial activity in terms of property investments and the investment funds. So just one main change really in this latest report, and it's relatively low value, but that relates to the Shire Hall relocation budget. We talked earlier on about some of the spokes buildings. There was spend on Hawthorne, preparation work on Hawthorne's. That building's not now being used, so that's spend that would have been funded from capital, but now comes back to revenue. So there will be some underspend on the capital budget, which we're working through at the moment, but that's creating just a slight pressure on the revenue budget as those staff are now going to CPDC. In terms of COVID impact, again, very little change, just a small increase in the pressure from property investments due to the continuing situation around property income during the pandemic. Capital, again, no significant issues to report, no change in the forecast at all. The only change is that the new budget line has been added for the ground source heat pumps, which were approved recently. So that's been added into the budget, but all expected to be spent this year. So that was all I really wanted to say, not a significantly changed report, Chair, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Justine. So I'm going to summarise that just for a light-hearted moment to say that basically you've seen no significant changes since I became chairman, which was May. Okay, I take that on board.
Yeah.
I think it's a report just for noting, isn't it? So I think we're okay. There's no actual vote on that one.
Indeed.
We'll take that as a recommend as carried. Okay, we'll move on to, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to the committee agenda plan and appointments to outside bodies. Dawn?
Sorry, Chairman. Councillor Bowden had his hand raised.
I humbly apologise. Head down reading and not looking at screen. Chris, would you like to come in, please? Sorry. Apologies, Dawn. We'll come to you in a second.
Thank you, Chairman. I did have a question which arose from Annex 2 to the report. This report, in any normal year, this report would be dreadful reading. But in the context of COVID-19 and everything that has happened, some of those enormous negative variances that we see compared with what we'd hoped for 12 months ago are fully understandable. And in some ways, I think we've actually got off more lightly than I might have imagined. But going into some of the detail, in Annex 2 in facilities management, I was interested to see the so-called overspend on business rates. And that was to do primarily with the Cambridge Archives Centre and us failing to anticipate effectively the change in business rates there and the backdating of that. And I've come across another thing, another example of this only in the last few weeks, where we in Cambridgeshire County Council failed to anticipate the requirement for business rates at the Kings Dyke construction site at the moment, where some of the construction buildings which are established there have had to have business rates applied, and we hadn't anticipated it. Do we have an issue in facilities management in failing to anticipate when buildings are being constructed or improved, failing to anticipate the increase in business rates and therefore failing to budget for it?
Justine, do you want to come back on that if you can?
I was wondering if that was why Tony had turned on his thing because he was going to respond.
Oh, Tony or sorry, Tony, if you want to come back in on it then.
You're on mute. Oh, you're not. We can't hear you, Tony.
You're not showing us on mute, Tony, but we can't
Right.
hear you.
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, I don't have a hand function on Zoom, so I can put my hand up. Apologies. In relation to the works project, I think that was in relation to budgeting for the actual scheme itself. So not a facility. It was not a facilities management project. In relation to the Cambridge Archives Centre, again, there was a budgeting issue where the wrong figure was used in the budget, but that was not provided through the estates team who actually deal with the rating for the council. So in simple terms, it was outside of our control. Whether it should have been picked up as part of a process, I'd need to look at the process in detail. But it was a failure to understand that the rateable value process, but as I say, it was not through the rating team who deal with that on our behalf.
I'm extremely apologetic to have fingered the rating team on this, but I think it would be really helpful if Tony could try to get that followed through to find out where the problem has occurred, so that if there is anything systemic, that we can try and avoid it in the future.
Indeed, there's an educational piece. Rateable values of buildings are readily available to any member of the public to look them up, and I'll make sure that's communicated around the council.
Okay, are you there? Oh yeah, you're still there. Okay, Chris Mallion, I think you've raised your hand. Terry, then I'll come to you.
Chairman, yes, if I may, just building on the point that Tony's made, really, I think particularly around the Bernard Sully building, Sunderley building. I know that they used a similar type building in order to estimate the level of business rates. I think it's fair to say that Tony's predecessors have been very successful in getting our rateable values reassessed, and we've reaped the benefits of that in terms of our revenue. So when a new building is constructed, if it hasn't gone through Tony's team, then there is a risk that we do underestimate the likely liability, certainly in the short term. But in relation to that particular building, I know that we are putting an appeal against the valuation, which we hope to be successful. But it does, as Tony highlighted, that there is a bit of an issue in terms of making sure that the program team, whichever program it happens to be, works more closely with Tony's team. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Terry Rogers. Terry, please. Not hearing you, Terry. Sorry, mate, you're still on mute.
Sorry about that. I do apologise. I said I think this goes back to the comment I made earlier when we were talking about care homes, and that's the question of forecasting. I often feel between our actual financial officers and other officers, that they need to cooperate a little bit closer for forecasting. It just leaves a question in my mind about how we're achieving correct figures. I'll say no more than that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, once again, I think we are where we are. I think we were just asked to note. Everybody seems to be in favour of that. Dawn, we'll try again. Thank you very much, Justine. Thank you very much, Tony. You've stayed with us for a good while this morning. Dawn, we're going to move on to item 11 now, which is the committee agenda plan and appointments to outside bodies. Are there any updates to the agenda plan to report, please?
I've just got one item being added on this morning to the agenda plan, and that's Cambridge Register Office refurbishment contract, which is being added onto the March agenda.
Okay, that's good. Right, well, on that matter, David, you've got your hand raised. Yes.
Yeah,
David?
when is Care Suites coming back?
I can speak to Gurdev and get a date and let the committee know.
I believe that will be. I believe that will be summertime at the earliest, David. That is my belief on that. But maybe if Dawn could put that on and put that around. And in the essence of this, and I'm quite happy to do this, would we like to put on a quarterly update for the This Land? I'm quite happy to do so and have a similar update. I think that would be a useful thing to do. Chris?
Chairman, could no problem with that suggestion at all, but can we align them to the quarterly shareholder meeting so that the same information is being used to update the committee as well as the shareholder?
Okay, I'll work with Dawn on that and make sure that we can get that sorted. But I think that may be a good idea moving forward and help allay some of the fears. Thank you for that. Just reminds me to say two things, if I can, please. First of all, from our committee, because we'll be working with them a great deal, I'd very much like to congratulate Tom Kelly on his appointment as your successor, Chris. I think he's got some big shoes to follow. Thank you for everything that the support that you've given us. Not that we quite see in the back of you just yet, are we? We've got a little bit longer. And I'd just like to point something out that we often have a little bit of not conflict, but discussion, shall we call it? But I think I'm right in saying, and Dawn may maybe know this off the top of the head, I think this is the third consecutive CNI meeting where every single item has gone through unanimous, voted after a good debate. And I think that's a sign of good working relationships and good committee, and also maybe the fact that the pre-meeting structure also helps us achieve that. I don't think we stifle debate. I think we have a good debate, but the fact that that's the answer that comes out at the end is a good position. So on that note, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Wish you a very, very enjoyable weekend of 16 to 17 degrees. So have a good weekend, everybody, and catch up with you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.